Well, hello again, everyone. Welcome to the Red and White Authority, episode number 11. I'm Art Redner along with Kevin Allen, and certainly we are talking Red Wings. A lot of surprises with Tuesday night's game against the Ottawa Senators. First and foremost, Petr Mrazek starting in net, played very, very well, and he will get the start in Thursday's game against the Boston Bruins. Another crucial game for the Detroit Red Wings. The Red Wings, I believe, have a game at hand to Boston. They're 2 points ahead. But certainly, the Bruins are going to come to Joe Louis Arena on Thursday night expecting to get 2 points from Detroit and at least tying them for third in the Atlantic Division. But let's first bring in Kevin Allen, the Hockey Hall of Fame writer from USA Today. And Kevin, first and foremost, I know what they say about assuming. And we've been doing a lot of assuming about goaltending in the Detroit Red Wings, and we have not been wrong. Not that, you know, we've been following, I know of this expression a lot of people don't like, but we've been following conventional wisdom. Virtually everybody thought Jimmy Howard would start last night's game. Were you surprised that Petr Mrazek got the nod? And what does that say about this goaltending situation for the Detroit Red Wings?
Well, I was surprised because, you know, the conventional wisdom might have been to go back to Jimmy Howard and giving him the opportunity to be the guy. But, you know, I mean, using the vernacular that Mike Babcock uses, I think what this says is Petr Mrazek is the #1 goalie until he's not. And, you know, I mean, I think what Mike Babcock is doing is another, you know, long-standing coaching principle, which is riding the hot goalie. Right now, Mrazek is playing better than Jimmy Howard, or at least the last time we saw Jimmy Howard. And I think, you know, as long as he's playing the way he, you know, did in the shutout he had against Tampa Bay, and again the way he played last night, you know, he certainly gave the Red Wings an opportunity to win. I'm sure he'll keep going. Now, that doesn't mean Jimmy Howard is out of it. I think it just means that, at least temporarily, Mrazek is going to be the guy. And I think the bigger concern for the Red Wings right now is just, you know, how the team is playing. Like, they weren't all that impressive, as anybody who watched can attest to, against the Senators. You know, they didn't put much offensive pressure on the Senators. They really made it an easy night for the Hamburglar. You know, it was not. He wasn't tested very often. And last night, if it wasn't for Mrazek, that would have been 2 points lost in regulation. And, you know, I think their situation would be a lot worse than it is now. As it is now, you know, the Ottawa Senators can still get 101 points. And, you know, if they suddenly went on another roll like they did when, you know, they were the top team in the NHL for about a 2.5-week period, then, you know, I think the Red Wings even got to worry about the playoffs at this point. But, you know, another big game, as you mentioned, against Boston. That's the most immediate concern. Boston can, you know, move into a tie with them in terms of points. And, you know, I think it's very important for the Red Wings to finish third. I mean, they feel like they have an opportunity if they play Tampa Bay to win that series. So it'll be interesting to see what happens tomorrow.
Kevin, I want to go back quickly about the goaltending situation and specifically to last night's game. Mrazek played very, very well, as we all know. I don't know if I've seen a game, and granted, the Red Wings were without Datsuk, who was a last-minute scratch. That kind of came as a surprise. Eric Cole didn't play. They lose Drew Miller within the first, 2 minutes of the game, and thank heaven he's going to be okay. And Riley Sheahan's out. So, and I'm not making excuses, but you know, 4 of their top 12 forwards were not in that game. And it kind of showed, you know, nothing against, you know, Stephen Weiss is trying his best, and, you know, Dan Cleary has hardly played at all this year. I don't know if it was his first game in 16 games or second game in 26. Let's just put it this way. He hasn't been playing a lot. And so, and then when you look at it, I cannot remember a game where the Red Wings were so thoroughly dominated on their home ice. I mean, Ottawa was all over them. I know people on Twitter and social media were complaining that they thought the referees were kind of, you know, forgetting the whistle there for a lot of times, except if it was for a Detroit player. But, I mean, Ottawa was just aggressive. They were all over them. And when you have a team that is as aggressive and forechecking as like the Senators were last night, it's going to lead to penalties for the opposition, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and I think they're subconsciously referees, if a team is being dominated the way the Red Wings were, you know, they start to feel as if it is really the Senators playing well and not the fact that they're committing any penalties. So It was just a tough game. I think that was the fewest number of shots the Red Wings had all season. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I don't remember them having that few shots, and really just had no pressure on him whatsoever. And I think they just have really lacked a consistency of performance levels since the last 2 or 3 weeks, really since they came back from that successful road trip. And you don't know from one game to the next, which Red Wing team you're going to get. And they've scored a lot of goals recently, but they haven't done it in such a way that you say, boy, they're really clicking offensively. And last night, as you mentioned, with the players missing, nobody really kind of stepped up and sort of took charge. Tatar, I thought, and Nyquist, had some moments, but it wasn't as if you watched any of the Red Wing lines and saying, boy, that trio is going well. It just didn't happen for the Red Wings last night, and it was almost like a survival skill test all the way through the game, as they were just kind of hanging on. And I thought they were going to survive with a 1-0 win. That's how it felt, because they were actually doing a pretty good job of surviving. And then, they got another long-range goal that I know, some fans were disappointed in, figuring if Mrazek got a piece of it, he should have been able to stop it. But goalies are going to give up goals, and I thought he was pretty well positioned on that play. He seemed to be tracking the puck. It did sort of touch his glove and then just kind of go into the net. But I thought he played a very strong game. He was very aggressive. I think it was probably the 8th or 9th save before he made a save in the blue paint. He was, and that's the way he always plays, well out of the blue paint. But he was ultra aggressive last night. He was, really getting out and challenging the shooter. And I thought he looked very, very confident. And again, I think that's important for a goalie. And I know Jimmy Howard said yesterday morning that he feels like he is confident, but he's not playing like that. If he is feeling confident, it's I think most of us are surprised to hear him say that, because he doesn't look confident when he's played.
Well, the Red Wings, and they went out of their way to say, listen, we have confidence in both of our goalies. And they kept saying that over and over because they were asked. But it does appear, and again, I know we asked at the last episode of the Red and White Authority, it just seems that they play differently in front of Mrazek than they do Howard. And again, I don't know if it's subconscious or not. And I'm almost, and I know I'm really speculating and reading into this, it almost appears that Mike Babcock, I think he's more comfortable, obviously, with Mrazek, but I think he's getting a sense that his team, whether they care to admit it or not, is more comfortable with Mrazek in net right now than Jimmy, even though everybody likes Jimmy and plays hard for him. Playing hard and playing smart sometimes, and playing with confidence are, entirely different.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the coaches always say, don't play harder, play smarter.
Right.
The one thing about Mike Babcock, one of the reasons why everyone feels like he'll have many different options when he's a free agent this summer is, his biggest strength is the ability to read where his team is at and moving the chess pieces around the board to make it most effective. And, even though we're surprised that Petr Mrazek ended up back in goal yesterday and Howard didn't get his chance, I mean, first of all, there was logic to what he said. He had given Jimmy Howard the opportunity after a bad performance to come back in, and he felt he wanted to do that for Mrazek. But I think a bigger issue is that Babcock knows his team, and he understands their biorhythms, and in that regard, he's very similar to Scotty Bowman. And I don't think any of us should second guess what Babcock does with his personnel, because historically, since he's been here in Detroit, he's always had his fingers on the pulse, and he's always, for the most part, made the right moves and getting the right team out there. So I think if you're a Red Wing fan, Mike Babcock has earned your trust. I think you got to say, hey, he knows this team, he knows it well, and as you said, he must feel that Mrazek gives this team the best opportunity to win right now. He probably senses the team plays better with Mrazek in between the pipes, and that's the way he's going to go, at least for the time being.
It's really kind of odd, Kevin. I mean, this does not seem to be a national story at all. I don't know of a lot of people that are captivated by this. I try to watch, the NHL Central show on the NHL Network at noontime, the show from Toronto with Nick Kyprios and McLean, and and those guys, and no one, and I know it's geared towards the Canadian franchises, but this just seems to be no big deal. And I'm looking at it as this is a pretty big deal if they're still kind of tinkering around with their netminder with 8 games to play or whatever it is now. I mean, this is just not. Unless Mrazek really comes out and plays well against Boston, and then they have those back-to-back games at Minnesota, and then against Washington at home on Sunday, Minnesota Saturday night. I mean, I don't know how, as the season winds down, you can keep playing musical goalies, and I guess they're not. I think it's Mrazek's job to lose, as you said, but this is just not a good situation for the Red Wings. It just can't be.
Well, I agree. I mean, it's not really a goaltending controversy. It's kind of a goaltending mess. I mean,
right.
I mean, it's not like they're choosing between two really good options at this point. And I think that's why it's not a national story. I mean, let's look at this logically. When you're looking at the Eastern Conference right now and you're talking goaltending, you're talking about Henrik, Lundqvist with the New York Rangers. You're talking about Braden Holtby with Washington, who has had a great season. Tuukka Rask, who has been very successful since he entered into this league. And you're talking about Carey Price, who's probably going to win the Vezina Trophy, and Ben Bishop, who is a giant of a man who is, even though he has no playoff experience, has been very good since he's been Steve Yzerman's goalie in Tampa Bay. Whether it was Howard or the young Mrazek, the Red Wings were not going to be the goalie favorite in the Eastern Conference, and I think that's why it's not getting much national attention. Is that Jimmy Howard, even when playing well, just doesn't have or even Halak and the Islanders, who's stepped up and really been the reason why the Islanders are one of the reasons why they're in the situation they're in now, which is they're considered a contender. But if Howard was going well, it wasn't as if we were going to say, well, that's an edge for the Red Wings, that it was Howard. And I think that's why whether they shift to Mrazek, does that make them any less likely to win? I don't think at a national level people look at it that way. I think the perspective about the Red Wings is that their goaltending is adequate and not a strength of the team like it is for some other teams.
Right. I mean, I'm not sure. I was watching something about one of the old Red Wings teams, or no, actually, I think it was John Cooper talking about his situation, or talking to Steve Yzerman. And Steve Yzerman said that there were times that he played on teams where the goaltending needed to be just adequate and they could win. He wasn't naming goalies, he wasn't naming specific teams, but when I look at his hockey card, except for Canadian national teams, it says all Detroit on it. So take that for what you will. But I'm not sure that this Red Wing team is in the situation that some of those Yzerman teams were in. They're going to need their goaltender at some point, I believe, and it almost happened last night with Mrazek, where he almost stole the game. And let's put it this way, that was a huge 2 points for Ottawa. Ottawa does not get Detroit wins 1-0 and gets outshot like 100-6 or whatever it was. I know I'm exaggerating here. I mean, if you're the Senators, your season's almost over. I mean, you're 8 points, behind the Red Wings at that point. And, as it is, I mean, they gained a point on Detroit, but still a huge point for Detroit. But an awfully, it kept Ottawa's season essentially alive. I might be melodramatic here, but it really did, especially with the way Boston won in the last minute of Florida team that pretty much was playing the same way against Boston that Ottawa was playing against Detroit. I watched a little bit of that game. And then, then you have, Tampa, what they lost to the Leafs, I think. So, I mean, it's just kind of crazy the way it kind of all played out. And the most fortunate team, although, I thought Ottawa deserved the 2 points, quite frankly. I mean, they were all over Detroit. I thought Detroit would be fortunate. But, sports is not fair, as we know. So, but still, as bad as the Red Wings played, getting that 1 point was huge, if anything, just to stay 2 points ahead of the Bruins.
Well, for sure. Although, they really needed to win that game in regulation, I felt, to close out the Senators in terms of maintaining their consecutive seasons in the NHL playoffs. Had they won that game, the Red Wings, in regulation, they would have been 8 points up with 6 games to go. That would mean, essentially the Senators are not going to catch them they're not going to fall completely out of the wild card spot. So, they've left themselves a little bit vulnerable. I still think they're going to get in. But, let's face it, like, how many people nationally believe the Red Wings are capable of making an extended run? Like, right now, I've appeared on some radio shows, and who's the teams that it looks like they're the easiest outs? Well, the two teams are two of the highest profile teams. The Penguins look like an easy out right now, and the Red Wings look like an easy out. The Red Wings are simply not playing well, and the Penguins have been inconsistent throughout the season, really been overrun by injuries. Two of their top players, and Pasquale Dupuis and Alimata, have been out all season, and then they've had a ton of guys just in and out of the lineup. So, those are two teams. But, what history tells us is, in the NHL playoffs, anything can happen. So, could the Red Wings sort of come together? Well, absolutely. But, as you mentioned, the teams that Steve Yzerman were playing with, that's a much better Red Wings team than this group. This team is still sort of coming together. We're still trying to discover like how good it can be, and they do need their goaltending to be better. Now, I tell you though, if their goaltending could be as good as Chris Osgood was in 2008, or Dominic Hasek in 2002, or Osgood back in '98, or Vernon in '97. Then they would have a chance. So, I think that sort is what Babcock is looking for. I think right now, and again, I'm putting words in Mike Babcock's mouth, and, he certainly understands his team better than I do, but, he's hoping that if he looks at his two options, who has the best chance of being better than anybody expected? And I think right now he thinks it's Mrazek, because Mrazek is more of a blank slate. We're not quite sure where he is. So, where Howard, I think we do know that when he's good, he can be very solid. But Mrazek has that potential to be great, and I think that's what he's banking on. That maybe he could squeeze, a good playoff run out of Mrazek, as long as he shows in the next 6 games that he can have some measure of consistency, which he didn't have when Howard was injured. He was a little up and down, as we know.
Right. Well, I find what's interesting about that is do you think that Jimmy Howard's a pretty known commodity? I think that he's an above-average goalie that has had adequate playoff numbers. They're not spectacular. They're not absolutely horrible. Although since he's come back from injury, his save percentage has been god awful. But that's neither here nor there. That Mrazek pretty much turned the fortunes around when he came from the Toledo Walleye to the Grand Rapids Griffins. They were not going anywhere. It was early in the season. Not only, he got a playoff berth for Grand Rapids and then won the Calder Cup. I mean, is that, and I know it's two different leagues and the jump from the AHL, and Anthony Mantha's experiencing that now to the NHL. I get all that. I understand that. Yet, he's won a championship. He's actually won a championship. And I'm not trying, and I like Jimmy. I hope it turns around. I really do. But when you look at Howard, even in college, I can remember him losing like a triple overtime or something in Maine where he was phenomenal, but they still lost the game. That he's unknown at this level, but he has played very well. Mrazek was great in the World Juniors for a team that had no business coming within a goal of beating or losing to Team Canada and beating Team USA. That he has a little bit of a track record of being a big-time goalie when it matters most. Or should we just cast that aside because, we're really talking, I hate this expression, and I never thought I would use it, apples and oranges here when we're talking AHL Calder Cup champion as opposed to the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs?
Well, no, I think it matters greatly. I mean, the run to the AHL championship is very similar to the run to the Stanley Cup in terms of what has to occur. You got to win 4 rounds. You got to win, best of 7 series. There's a grind attached to it. It's like running a gauntlet. It's a high-level league. I think a lot of people see the rivalry between the KHL and the NHL, but I think when we see the KHL players come over here and play in the NHL, what's pretty obvious is that maybe the AHL might be better than the KHL in terms of the talent that's there. So I mean, I think it means a lot. The way I view this is if you're a card player, if you play Texas Hold'em, there's two ways to approach a game. You can nickel and dime and play conservatively and try to slowly nurture your stack and let it grow and try to win that way. Or, you can push all in and try to win a big thing and go for it. And I think, Mrazek, Howard is the known quantity. You know what you're going to get, and I thought your assessment was right on the money. He's had adequate numbers. He's a solid performer. I was embedded with the U.S. Olympic hockey selection process when they chose Jimmy Howard to be the number 3 goalie, and I remember David Poyle, talking about, hey, look, I've seen this guy in the playoffs. I think he's a solid goaltender. I think you know what you get from him. I think he can be a consistent performer, and he spoke very highly of him. And obviously, he's a competitor of Howard. So Howard has a pedigree of sort, but I don't think people view Howard as a guy who is a Vezina Trophy candidate or could have one great season or have an incredible playoff run. And I think Mrazek has been thought of as one of the best young prospects, and he has that blank slate, as I mentioned before, and I think people do believe that he has that potential to be the difference in a playoff series, that he has because of his ultra-aggressive style. And, I used this comparison before, but, who else does that? Jonathan Quick. And we know what style of playoff goalie he is. And I think people look at that and say, hey, maybe he could rise up and if he could maintain some level of consistency, sort of win a series. So, I think Mike Babcock is intrigued by that. But, saying all that, I also know that, Mike is not going to risk the Red Wings' fortune if he senses, any lack of consistency from Mrazek. I mean, I think for Mrazek to get that playoff job, he's got to show something over these next few games. I think he's got to show that he can be a consistent player, and he needs to be as hot on April 11th as he was, yesterday and on in that shutout over Tampa Bay. He's got to maintain that level if they're going to give him an opportunity in the playoffs.
Well, and I think the way he did respond yesterday, though, that's a good sign maybe for the Red Wings and for Petr Mrazek.
Sure. I mean, and that's been his M.O. His M.O. has been, and the differences has been between him and Howard. And again, I'm only talking about Howard during the slump, because earlier in the season he was, as we all know, played very, very well. But during the slump, Howard has not been able to pick himself up off the mat, and Mrazek has been able to do that. When he was Howard's replacement, he'd give up a bad goal, but he'd grit his teeth, and then suddenly he'd be strong for the next 2 periods. Or if he'd have a bad game, the next game he'd really be strong. He'd rise up, and I think Babcock has seen that and thinks, okay, that's a sign of a goalie that's sort of figuring it out, and when he really gets it together, he could be an exceptional goalie. And you mentioned it before, and it was a very astute observation, and that is that when Tiger Woods, for example, was on the top of his game, when players would get the lead, they could hear the Tiger coming. Right. They could sense it. And I think Jimmy Howard has heard the Tiger coming. He's felt it. He's felt that pressure, and you brought it up. And I hadn't given that much thought until you brought it up, but I think he has. I think he's heard that Tiger coming, and I think he's let it get to him a little bit, and he knows he's in a fight for his job. I
know that you were at the game last night. I always used to get knocked because I would years ago when I was on the Red Wing Radio Network or when I was doing a daily talk show, Detroit sports talk show. I would always talk about the mood of the room, the sense that I got when I walked in, and people would say, "Yeah, right," like But they're only human beings, and you can tell just by the vibe, and people we because of the creatures we are, and we're all emotional to a certain degree. You can kind of tell what's going on. You can say, "Whoa, this is kind of a weird feeling in here." What was it? I would imagine that after the game, the Red Wings had to be relieved that they had a point, relieved that. Drew Miller was, did not lose an eye, for God's sakes, that he was going to be, relatively fine as soon as he healed up, and that Petr Mrazek played very, very well, because aside from that, there wasn't a lot of positivity in that game.
Well, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to help you out, Art, because, as you know, I'm a national writer, and yesterday my story was the Ottawa Senators. I spent all my time in the Ottawa Senators room, trying to talk to them about, making their run for the playoffs. And, to me, the big story for me was Clark MacArthur saying we still got a little magic left in the hat. Meaning they really felt that they could make still make a run, and they felt very fortunate. So I didn't get a sense last night of the Red Wings room. Obviously I've been there in recent games, and I think it's mostly because Zetterberg is the leader. It's always a pretty confident room.
Well, it is pretty confident, and let's go then. Let's go to the Senators, because I'm thinking, well, Kevin was there, probably, this whole Mrazek thing is probably over there. But you're right. I mean, the Senators, I would imagine, as well as they played, and they played well, and I just said they deserved the 2 points, they probably really had to feel that they got the reprieve from the governor, as they were walking the 13 steps or the Green Mile. I mean, they came pretty close to that chair last night.
Yeah, that's a strong analogy. No, I mean, they really did feel relieved. I mean, it was a huge win for them. They just kept pressing against the Red Wings. They felt like they were playing well. They thought it was a matter of time. There was a lot of talk about sticking to the system, making sure that they continued to play the same way and didn't open it up and give up that second goal. And this is almost has this feeling of a team of destiny, and for a variety of reasons. They have the former Bowling Green goalie Andrew Hammond, the Hamburglar, as he's called, who stepped up and given them a real shot. And they have Erik Karlsson is probably their one-star player now. He's the best puck-rushing defenseman in the game, and suddenly he's played better in the second half. And I think that the team has risen up under the idea that they want to make sure that Brian Murray, who's battling cancer, has a playoff team. He's had struggles this season, so I think they're rallying behind that as well. And it wasn't a couple of years ago they lost Daniel Alfredsson, who defected to the Red Wings. Jason Spezza got traded, and probably they're also, I would say they're probably the least popular Canadian franchise. Like, even teams that Edmonton Oilers have a history because of Gretzky. The Calgary Flames, have some history as well. They've won cups, in the Ottawa Senators, even though they're a historic franchise. If you look at them, early in the early years of hockey, since they've come back as an NHL franchise, they've really been sort of a nondescript franchise. And so for all those reasons, I think this has sort of been a real spirited run by them. And, they're not out of it yet. They keep hanging in there. The Bruins have awakened, and they're playing more like a Bruins team that we would expect. And they pulled off a big win, and the Senators kept pace. I think those 3 losses, though, that they had coming into this game, those were critical losses. Like, they needed to continue that march that they had when they were, I think, 8-2 over 10 games, and only the New York Rangers were playing at the same level the Senators are. But they looked like a legitimate playoff team last night, I felt.
I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was a player or an NHL executive was saying about how close the standings are in both conferences. They said, you feel good about yourself. You're like second, third in the league, it seems like, and then you lose 2 games and you're 14th. I mean, it's you just can't. You've got to consistently at least get a point almost every single night to ensure yourself. That's why it was crucial for the Red Wings to get a point last night. Don't kid yourself. That was a huge point for Detroit. But I mean, I can't see. Is it truly just a salary cap league, or is it because there's a lot of 3-point games in the NHL, and that maybe? And do you think, Kevin? Let me throw one at you. Do you think that they will go to it and adapt a system where victories now will be 3 points, and if a game does go into overtime, whether it's decided by a shootout or 4-on-4 or 3-on-3, the winning team will get a point, meaning they'll get 2. The opposition will get 1, meaning that victory, which really puts in, if you can win in regulation, it's still the name of the game because you're going to get 1 more extra point.
Yeah, see, I don't think they're going to shift to that. I mean, there's a lot of logic to that. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to make the regular season victory worth 3 points because that's the ultimate goal, to win in 60 minutes of hockey. That's what we're trying to do. You're trying to win in 60 minutes. And it makes more sense if all games are 3 points and not some games are worth 3 and some are worth 2. But here's why I don't think they're going to do it. A lot of people refer to parity. Most of it has been created by the salary cap. If you look around the league, every team, it's quite democratic. Everybody's got 5 or 6 really good players, and then it's how you surround those 5 or 6 good players that you're paying your most money to that decides ultimately which teams are good and which are not. But I think the second element of that is this manufactured parity, which is created by these 3-point games, which sort of allows everybody to kind of stay in the race.
Right.
And when everybody stays in the race, the buildings are full. Everybody says, "Hey, my team's only 6 points." And I think if you went to that 3-point system, you'd have a much greater gap between the top teams and the bottom teams. And I don't think the league wants that. I think they like this manufactured parity, which here we are in April now, and there are still races to be decided. There are teams that are still hanging in there, and I think it allows teams with the 3 and 2 system to stay in the race longer. That's why I don't think they're going to go to that, even though logic says, and they'll give you an excuse. They'll say, well, we have a lot of records that are all based on the 2-point system, and it just changes everything if you go to 3-point. But I think it's this manufactured parity that they really like because it allows teams to hang in longer and sort of pretend they're contending, even though they're not as good as the top teams.
Well, we'll see. Because the Big Ten conference obviously has 3 points as winning, and that's. And that's something that conference has done right. Don't even get me started on Big Ten hockey because I could go on forever about that. I have no idea. They need more than a 6-team league. Trust me. Whether you grandfather in a couple, go to Notre Dame or Miami of Ohio and say, listen, join or anything. They need more than 6 teams. But I'll get off that.
They need to sell a little more beef in Nebraska and get Nebraska to have a team, and then you have a natural rivalry for Omaha, Nebraska, and then you'd have another Big Ten team, and then I'm sure we can find one other. Northwestern should have a team as well.
Yeah, you are on the same page. I've talked to Tom Manassas, the head hockey coach at Michigan State University and a former CCHA commissioner. I am surprised that Northwestern does not have a Division I hockey team. I know maybe it's not cost effective. It's probably has to do something with an arena. But my God, they're in Evanston, LA. They're in Chicago. I mean, I think they could find an arena to house a Division I hockey team. But and all the Ivy League schools for the most part seem to play Division I, and they're pretty good at it. You would think that Northwestern would like to be among them. And I think purple and white. I think they could have a pretty cool looking uniform. But aside from that, let's get back, shift our focus to the Red Wings because I'm all over the road again, and I think it's more because of nerves. And there's a couple of things that I'm nervous about, and one of them is that Joachim Anderson was their best face-off man by far, and that the Red Wings lost a lot of draws, which allowed Ottawa to dictate the style of the game. I think it's pretty obvious, why the Red Wings are such a great team is because they win face-offs, they possess the puck, and they're a great puck possession team. In order to be a great puck possession team, most of the time you have to win face-offs so you can possess the puck. That was not happening last night, kind of played into the Senators' hands. I mean, there was never one moment in that game last night as I was watching it where you were right. They never sustained any pressure. You're thinking, okay, I mean, heck, it was almost one and done on shots. I mean, it was almost that bad. There was nothing really happening. Henrik Zetterberg. He's been streaky as far as he gets a lot of points. You never question his leadership. I never question his effort. I never question his talent. I never question his desire. But again, it happens. And whenever the Red Wings, the fan base starts to panic a little bit, they all talk to me or they say, God, is Father Time catching up with Z? Should we be concerned because his streaks of scorelessness, at one time fewer and far between, but now they're kind of closer. And any worry about Z at all?
Well, sooner or later, you're not going to be as good as you were when you're in your prime. And I mean, obviously Zetterberg is an older player. He's not 27 anymore, and he's not 28, and so there's going to be a decline. Not many players can play into their 30s as well as they did in their 20s. But the truth of the matter is, every NHL team would love to have Henrik Zetterberg. He's a very valuable player, and he does, I'd still think in terms of the ability to protect the puck, he's got to be in the top 5 or 6 in the league. Like, nobody can hang on to that puck along the boards the way he can. Now, he's been more offensively productive at other points in his career, but I think he's still a very valuable player. But as your players get older, it's incumbent upon the manager to get other players who can step in and fill the void. But Zetterberg is still a vital contributor on this team, and I don't even think you can even entertain a discussion about the importance of of Zetterberg to this team. Like, without him, they're just not as effective.
No, and you can go back to last year's playoff, and I guess my point, and maybe what I was kind of leading into is that's what makes Pavel Datsyuk so exceptional, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure.
Because they missed him. You could tell they missed him last night. And when I found out and they said, well, Datsyuk has been scratched from tonight's lineup, there was a collective groan from me and the 6 cats that I have that are watching this game with me. I mean, everybody was kind of shaking. Even they could they understand the enormity of the situation. I mean, yeah. And you could see they are completely different without him. And it is amazing, that here's a guy who, is going to play in his 40s in the KHL. He's pretty much made that pretty evident. And he's really, if he's missing a step, it's a half a step. That's about it. It's amazing what he's able to do. And I think when Zetterberg has an off night, it's magnified because Datsyuk doesn't really have too many off nights.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the difference. Datsyuk's offensive production is based on magic that he has. He's got a little abracadabra, and he hasn't lost that. He still has magic and he has abracadabra. Zetterberg was always, his offense is based on grit and hard work and drive, and he's not 27. So right. So he doesn't. He's not as he still has fire and passion to play, but he doesn't have the same abilities to drive by players that he had when he was younger. So it's going to be off a little bit. So I'm not saying he's still as valuable as Datsyuk because he does so many other different things. And I think you really understand his value. Like, for example, if you remember back earlier in the year when the Toronto Maple Leafs didn't salute their fans, it became so overwhelming that became the story in Toronto. Well, that would never happen in Detroit with Zetterberg as a leader because he has a sense of the way you command and what should be done and done properly. So he has a lot of value on this team, and but I think as a manager, I'm sure Kenny Holland's aware that maybe they counted on Z for 25 goals when he was in his prime, and now they're thinking, okay, if we get 18 out of him, or whatever the number is, then we're going to be very happy because he still does a lot of other things. And when you start thinking in those terms, then you've got to find, the secondary scoring becomes more crucial. And the one thing about the Red Wings scoring, like, they score a lot of goals, but to me there hasn't been the level of consistency with their offensive attack that you would like to see. Like, they're in and out. You don't have the guys, the teams that are really the strong offenses, like the Tampa Bay Lightning. Let's just use them for an example, Steve Yzerman's team. Every night they seem to find scoring, and it's, pretty darn consistent all the time. It's not up and down. Either they got the second line going, or they got the Stamkos line going, or they're getting, Boyle chips in a goal, and they can count on that all the time. With the Red Wings, some nights they get 4 goals, the next night they get no goals. They don't seem to be able to kind of rotate that scoring the way the top lines do. So I think that's an area of concern. Right now the Red Wings seem a little bit out of sync to me. They're not, you see parts of it. You think they've got the ability to be a very good team, but right now it's not all not clicking on all 8 cylinders.
Could it best be explained, and I'm trying to add a little bit of brevity, I guess is the word, to this situation, that they've all turned into Johan Franzen. They're either all they're either really hot, scoring goals in bunches, or they're not going to score for what seems like an eternity. I mean, it is kind of odd how it although again, I have to say I'm still encouraged by Nyquist and Tatar's play. It might not be going in as often for them, but they still seem to find themselves. I guess the guy that I'm kind of worried about, although I think his ice time, and we've talked about it before, his ice time has been kind of slashed, and you can tell he's still trying to learn his way around the league, is Teemu Pulkkinen. I think Pulkkinen, I think he's starting to get a little bit frustrated at this level. I don't think it's because of his ice time, but he obviously feels that he has to, and we've talked about this, has to bury his chances. Every opportunity he gets, much like Thomas Jurko now, they have to do something with it. And I think that Jurko has kind of drifted in and out, although I think Pulkkinen finds himself in position, but sometimes he's not able to execute. So it's, as opposed to, I think Nyquist and Tatar are doing everything that they have to do. And also I think Riley Sheahan is a loss. I think you can see that. He's a big body. He protects the puck well, so they need to get some of their healthy guys back. And I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but I don't know if Drew Miller should play in tomorrow's game.
Yeah.
You got 50 stitches or whatever. Why don't you give yourself a few days to heal?
Yeah, no, I agree, and I'm sure he wants to play because that's sort of the code. You got to get back in. You got to prove that you're a real hockey player. But Drew Miller to me has to prove nothing. We know he's a real hockey player. We've seen him throw his body in front of slap shots. But here's the difference too. I think at the start of the year they hoped Jurko or Pulkkinen one would rise up and be a player. Now I think they need one of those two.
Right.
Because Franzen's out now, and there's they're not quite getting as much production as they would like out of, to me, Nyquist and Tatar, I agree with you. Every game, there's a danger level, and they can do the things like Tatar in particular has been a bundle of energy pretty much since the first game of the season. Like, he is always spinning around, and he always seems dangerous to me in every game. And Nyquist has had his moments. I mean, even, you can say the Hammond should have stopped his goal that Nyquist scored the other day. I mean, it was a long-range shot, but, he seems to put those shots where it's difficult for those goaltenders to flag him down. But, they need either Jurko or Pulkkinen to step up. Secondary scoring is so important in the playoffs. They're going to need those guys. They really need Helm to be an offensive contributor. It's nice that he flies around, and I think he makes the team a better team when he's, creating a lot of energy. But, he's got to score, too. He's capable of scoring. We know that he can do it. He has shown, that he can create offense, and I think they need to do that. I mean, this team just needs more secondary scoring so that it's not, the pressure isn't on, Zetterberg and Datsuk, Nyquist, and Tatar to do all the scoring. If you're going to be successful and win in the playoffs, you've got to get goals out of your third and fourth lines as well.
Right, certainly. That has always been kind of a hallmark for the Red Wings. They were able to, I can go back to some of their crucial playoff series. You had guys like Marty Lapointe and Chris Draper scoring goals in overtime or setting guys up, and although Thomas Holmstrom was, I always considered him to be a top six forward, but he came up big at really crucial times too. He scored a lot of big goals for Detroit, and Slava Kozlov going way back. There has always been somebody, and you're right. And I think that is one of the things that we've talked about with the Red Wings for the last several seasons, it seems like, is secondary scoring. Where is the secondary scoring? And I almost at this point want to take it a step further. Not only where is the secondary scoring, where is the consistent scoring? And
right.
That's it's tough to win hockey games when you're not consistently scoring goals.
Yeah, but I will say this, and I'll bet you agree with me. You see it's there. Like, the way Abdicator has emerged, and I think everyone now believes that Nyquist and Tatar are for real. that you can pencil those guys in for 50 goals between them. I think that's a true.
That's fair. I agree with that.
Yeah, and an Abdicator has risen up, and you still got Datsuk, playing at a high level, and Zetterberg is going to be there. So you got 5 guys now. To me, you just need to get everyone else going, and there is potential there. The skill levels that Pulkkinen and Yurko bring are impressive. So you hope one of those guys it's all going to come together. And then Helm has world-class speed. Clendenning has value with his skating, and as I've said on previous Red and White Authorities, I think he's going to be like Draper. Like one of these years, he's just going to stun everybody and get 20 goals, just because Draper did that. And you look at Draper's record. He just had that one season where he had 20. That was the only one. Otherwise, he was, right where Clendenning is going to be, which is in the 10 to, 14 range probably every year. So there's a lot of potential here, and I think that's I don't think that's a bigger problem as they got to get the goaltending figured out, and more importantly, they got to get the defense figured out as well. I mean, they gave up too many opportunities again. Last night, there were moments, and I know you've been concerned about Eriksson, and if you watched that game last night, there were a couple of moments where you watched Eriksson and you said, is that really the right play that you want to make, Jonathan? I think the defense proved early in the season that they can play a safe, conservative game, and I think that's the way they got to play.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. And Kevin, I have enormous amounts of respect for you. As you know, you're a very good friend of mine, and I'm not going to throw you under the bus or anything. But up to this point, I'm going to leave you alone on that Luke Glendenian island. All right. It's not that I'm not going to join you someday, but I'm still, I'm still on the raft thinking, I think that island might get absorbed by the sea here. I'm going to stay here for, I'm going to stay here for a second, but we'll see. Hey, he's a heck of a player. He's been an overachiever everywhere he went. The story of how he even got to Michigan, that Billy Powers was looking at his teammate at a prep school out east, and he kept going back to Glendenning. Then he found out Glendenning was from Michigan, was an all-state football player. And lo and behold, he was, I think, 2 years a captain at Michigan. So, Red doesn't throw that C around lightly, So obviously, and Babcock really likes him. So maybe it'll happen. He does seem to have offensive ability, but we'll put that aside. Let's look at that game tomorrow. Datsuk, I guess a game time decision. I don't know. Eric Cole's injury looked a little bit serious when it happened. He does have the history of the broken neck and all that. So I don't know if he'll be available. Sheahan, I guess, is day to day. Hopefully they get a couple of forwards back. Drew Miller, I'm giving you a permission slip. You don't have to play tomorrow. I know you want to, and I know you want to be on Coach's Corner on Saturday where Don Cherry can go, look at that North American lad. He's not Canadian, but he's close, and look at that cash. Oh, ain't that beautiful? Oh, look at that, 50 stitches, and he played them 2 days later. Forget that. All right, no one in the United States sees Coach's Corner that much anyway. So just maintain. Although everybody in Detroit watches it, I know I certainly do. But with all that said, they need a few things to fall into place for them tomorrow. But again, as we've been saying now, and I hate to sound redundant here, Mrazek's going to have to goaltend his tail off.
Yeah, no, he does. They need a real strong game from him. He as I've said before, they need him to be strong the rest of the way. They need to establish, if this is the way they're going to go, that he's ready for the playoffs. He needs to be consistent. He needs to limit the bad goals. Like, all goalies give up bad goals, or at least goals that we now call bad goals. They used to just be goals in the olden days, because goalies gave up goals. But now, we differentiate. We have enhanced scoring, and we have enhanced evaluation and analysis of goals given up. And he needs to limit the soft goals that he gives up, and he needs to show that he's strong, that he can hold up and play down the stretch every game if that's what they're intending to do. And if he falters, I think they'll give Jimmy another chance. And the only issue with all that is there's 6 games left, and the Red Wings are fooling around with their goaltenders.
Right.
Yeah, you know, is it possible that Mike Babcock doesn't know which goalie he's going to play in the playoffs? I think it is possible. I think he's looking now, as I said, where we started this program, which is, what Mike Babcock said about Jimmy Howard. He's our number one goalie until he's not. Well, right now Petr Mrazek is until he's not. The way he's played in 2 of the last 3 games. But if he's the goalie that we saw against the Islanders, then Captain Hook will be out and Jimmy Howard will be back in.
Where do you think Jimmy's mind is at right now? I mean, because that's real curious where his confidence level is because, over the years, Jimmy Howard has had kind of a checkered career here in Detroit. He came in, he was out of shape and out of weight, overweight, and it took him a while to play himself back into the good graces of the organization. And, at times it's been reported that Babcock isn't exactly thrilled with Jimmy in net, and it appears that, I think Mike Babcock has pretty much just drawn the line in the sand, and I know we've said it before, but I think Mrazek's his guy, and I'm sorry, Jimmy, you're a big man. We're all pros here, as Babs likes to say. I didn't make this decision. You made this decision. And I'm just kind of wondering, because Howard came in so much, and I know I talked about this, with so much positive energy, the birth of his second son during the off season, and he knew he had to rebound, and he was rebounding, and then he gets this injury that looked a lot worse than coming back like 3 or 4 weeks later. I just am wondering, can Jimmy Howard get it back together? Because it certainly seems the decision has been made that Mrazek's the guy from here on out.
Yeah. Well, yeah. He has, I don't know, it's the old French saying is there's nothing so temporary as a permanent solution in the NHL. He is for now, but we'll see what happens. But, this is just the way it is with goalies, and we talk about this all the time. Backup NFL quarterbacks and backup goalies are always the most popular athletes in any city, and everybody's always looking to move the incumbent out because they think that the guy underneath them could be better. And I just had a conversation today with an NHL official, and we were just having a off-the-record conversation about what's going on in San Jose and in Edmonton and some of the teams that are facing budgetary woes. And the guy who shall remain nameless said to me, well, he said, let's just, Chicago's got some tight cap space, but he said, look, Joe Quenneville likes Darling, their backup, a lot. So what if they trade Corey Crawford and they can get Crawford out? And he said, there's some teams looking for goalies, like Edmonton would love Crawford, San Jose would probably love Crawford. Then they can move that out, and then they've got room to maneuver. And so, they don't have to trade one of their forwards, and maybe they can keep Johnny Oduya. So my point of all that is everybody, there's always issues with goalies, and everybody thinks that it's real easy to move them around. I think Jimmy Howard, it's just as likely that he could still end up being the Red Wing goalie for years as it is that Mrazek could be the guy. I think everything is still open. But if Mrazek is the guy and he makes a good run in the playoffs, I think Jimmy Howard would be a good fit in Edmonton or San Jose or whoever else is looking for a goalie. So I think Jimmy Howard still has the potential at age 31 to be a long-time NHL goalie, whether it's here in Detroit or elsewhere.
Well, Jimmy Howard for Logan Couture, I like that move.
Yeah, I think regardless of how Mrazek played, the Red Wings would make that move right now.
Right. Yeah.
even if they believe that Jimmy Howard was their long-range goalie, I think they'd make that move. We'll take our chances and find another goalie. So.
I'm not so sure San Jose would do that. It reminds me years ago, the first time I ever hosted a radio show, before the trade deadline was like, you're the GM, and I swear it was like you call up and I'm the opposing GM because everybody wanted to be Ken Holland or Scotty Bowman, who was in charge of player personnel there for a while. The first trade proposed to me is that I was the Pittsburgh general manager. They wanted to trade Tim Taylor for Jaromir Jagr. You know, it's like, yeah, right. Come on, that's why I hate to do those segments. Hey, let's make a trade, because they're so one-sided. And I'm not saying anything against Jimmy Howard. Obviously, he'd be a valuable goalie, but Logan Couture, I always love it. Every time he comes to Detroit, he talks about how all his buddies, I guess he's from London, I think it's London, Ontario, where like all his friends are Red Wing fans. they're all Red Wing fans. They come to see him play, but they're still rooting for the Red Wings, which I guess he can't get over. At least, I maybe it's changed now, but I remember he's told that story a few times when I've actually talked to him and seen him in interviews. But with that said, let's look at the Boston Bruins. Where Kevin, I'm looking at the time here. We only have about 7 minutes or so left. They're a weird team too. I mean, here was a team much like Ottawa that wasn't even a playoff team a couple of months ago, or people were saying, hey, it's pretty serious. This was a team that everyone thought could contend for the Stanley Cup, maybe along with the Rangers in the East, and nothing's happening. But they're slowly but surely working their way back. And even though Claude Julien it's still rumored that he's going to be let go, or that he could possibly be let go, why do you think the Bruins have turned it around?
Well, I think their defense has found some cohesiveness. They had some younger players there. Dougie Hamilton got hurt, but before then, he was making strides. Although I think the jury's still out about whether he's going to be a great defenseman or a very good defenseman. And you're splitting hairs, but I think at one point they were hoping this guy could be a star as opposed to just being a top pairing defenseman. But let's look at it from the start of the season. I think everybody underestimated what the loss of Jerome McGinley, Sean Thornton, and Johnny Boychuk, particularly Johnny Boychuk. Right. I think that was the biggest loss. I think Johnny Boychuk gave them their bite on the back end, and when they traded him, I think that made a difference in terms of their ability to beat the Bruins. I mean, what makes the Bruins is their grit, their snarl, their teeth, and all three of those players that are moved out, were guys that did that. And then on top of that, I mean, Krejci, that was a huge injury for them. That really disrupted Lucic, who hasn't been the same player. Now, he stepped up. I believe he got a bbig goal. Didn't he get the game winner last night? I'm not
yes, he did, yeah.
absolutely positive of that. But, he's a very effective player, but he doesn't have that level of consistency. He needs Krejci to make it all happen for him. So I think this is still a very good team. And I think they've sort of remembered who they are. I think Bergeron is one of the most underrated players in the league. I think everybody sort of knows he's very good, but like he's Johnny Taves good. He's Datsuk good, and I don't think he gets that amount of attention. He is a top level player who can win faceoffs. He can score big goals. He can set up. He can play defensively. He's a good leader. He's a good spokesman. He does a lot of things. So, this is still a very good team, and the Tampa Bay Lightning have all sorts of trouble with the Bruins. So, it's going to be interesting, and I think it's, to me, just hard to fathom why everybody thinks that Peter Chiarelli, that's the general manager, and Claude Julien are in danger there. I mean, Claude Julien is one of the better coaches in the league. Like, if you start asking people to rate coaches that know the game, Babcock's going to be up there, Quenneville's going to be up there, Claude Julien's going to be up there. He's going to be in the top 5 or 6 in the game. And I think in terms of being a defensive style coach and being a bench coach, like if you watch that game tomorrow, watch the way Julien works his lineup. No coach works his lines the way Julien does. He'll start fiddling with it almost immediately. Like, some coaches, they assess for a couple of periods, and then, in the third period, they come up with their answer. He'll come up with his answer in about the third shift if he doesn't like what's going on. He'll start moving people around. So I think it's still a very good team, and I know the Tampa Bay Lightning have a great, healthy respect for the Bruins, because they still see them as a team that you got to get by in order to win that conference.
When they traded Boychuk, it was just before the season began, and I was watching New England Sports Network or whatever, where the Bruins are on, and you could tell at that point the announcers and the team, they were devastated. They were all stunned and shocked, and it almost reminded me of how the Pistons reacted when Joe Dumars traded Richard Hamilton. You know, the Pistons were never traded, traded. It wasn't Rip they traded. Was it Chauncey?
Chauncey Billups.
Yeah, Chauncey Billups. You know, they never, you know, the way Rip, you know, was like Chauncey had perished, you know, and of course he didn't. They just never were able to get over that, and it seems like it's taken Boston. I know Char got hurt, as you said, and Krejci got hurt, and you know, now Dougie Hamilton's hurt. But it seemed to take them a while to get over it, you know, to really get over it, and I think that's why the GM got into trouble. Was like he almost overestimated the impact that would have, even though, you know, for financial concerns. I mean, there was sound reasoning going behind why he was traded, but the effect that it had on the team was almost cataclysmic to a certain degree. So
well, it is, and NHL fans are different than NFL fans. In the NFL, we've now been preconditioned to accept whatever salary cap calamity comes our way in terms of being fans. You know, everybody, you know, they raise their hands and say, you know, what are you going to do? You know, you got cap problems, you know, and you know, they don't do that in the NHL. If, you know, the cap problems caused the Bruins to have to trade Johnny Boychuk, the fans in Boston say, well, you should have managed your cap better, you know.
Right,
Which,
right.
They hold them just a little bit more accountable, in my opinion, than they do in the NFL. I think fans in the NFL just think that, you know, teams are going to have cap problems, and you know, that's just, you got to live with that. But not in the NHL. You know, they expect you to figure out a way to keep, you know, the guys that they want you to keep. And to be honest, I do agree that I think they underestimated the importance of Johnny Boychuk, not only to the team but in the room. Like, he's a very popular player, and you know, he did everything. Like, he's got an amazing shot. Like, it's just a rocket. And I don't think a lot of people know that because he wasn't utilized as an offensive defenseman. But he does. He is just a cannon, and he gets it off in a hurry. And you know, you see guys. It is like the parting of the sea when he winds up, because guys know that he can just, you know, snort it, and boom, it's gone. You know?
Right. Yeah, you know, it's like when Shea Weber tees it up. It's like, okay, go ahead. Go right ahead. All right, Kevin. Let's look at it in the final minutes here. I said last night after the Red Wings lost, I tweeted out something. I can't exactly remember, but I know I did. One of my hashtags was "looks like the Rangers." You know, meaning that, you know, they could fall into that 8th spot. Maybe they won't. I know they don't want to, as you said. They would much rather play Tampa. But you know, Tampa. Who knows what's going to happen with Tampa? Tampa and Montreal are in a dogfight too for the top spot in the Atlantic. So I'm not sure how that will play out, but. Again, you know, and we'll reassess this after each and every game, I'm sure. I still think they're going to make the playoffs. I'm not so sure what position they're going to be in.
Well, I would agree with that, but let's look at this. Like, right now, you know, what I would say is, well, first of all, I mean, would you be shocked if they could beat any of those 3 teams? I think they could. Like none of those teams are invincible. But, you know, for my money, you know, I don't want to play the Rangers, and this is why. You know, Lundqvist, I know, is rusty now, but he's Lundqvist, and we know what he can do, and he took a team to the final last year that probably wasn't good enough to go, and they got tremendous speed, so the Red Wings speed won't bother them, and their defense, you know, I keep saying this to people, but it's now McDonough, Girardi, Stahl, Yandel, and Klein's hurt, but I think he's going to be back. And Boyle, who's past his prime, but if Dan Boyle is your number 6 defenseman, you know, you're okay.
Right.
And you know, they've got, you know, Stepan has had a good year. They've got some top flight players up there. So I would want to play them. I think you got to avoid that. I still think Tampa. You know, Bishop's a bit of an unknown. I know he's played well, but he has no playoff experience. So to me, if I'm the Red Wings, I think, okay, this is where I want to go. And Montreal has no offense. I think if you can figure out a way to beat Carey, like, you have a chance to keep them off the scoreboard. You're not keeping the Lightning off the scoreboard. They're going to score goals.
Right.
But you know, they'll give up some chances. And if Bishop isn't strong, you know, you might be able to win that series if your goalie, you know, steals a game here and there. And so I I think they have an opportunity against all those teams, but I just think it would be a great series if it's Yzerman versus the Red Wings.
Oh yeah, it would certainly be great. All right, Kevin. One final question: Red Wings beat the Bruins tomorrow?
Yeah, I think they will. I think Mrazek is going to play a big game, and I think the Red Wings are ready to rise up. I think, even though they lost that game, I think they were encouraged by their ability to survive that onslaught and still find a way to get a point. And I think they felt like they were unlucky in that shootout. Like they have faith that Mrazek can win the shootout.
Yes, they can. All right. Well, with that said, Kev, we'll have to end it there. I don't know. Are you up for another one on Friday, you think?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. Let's do it. I think Friday we'll have to do it. Oh, wait a minute. I can't do it Friday. I'm going to be gone. I'll be traveling.
Okay. Well, maybe then maybe Saturday?
Well, I could do one late in the day on Friday. Could we do it?
Well, all right. Let's our times are revolving here anyway.
Right.
So all right. We'll try to get a episode 12 to you on Friday after the game, but that'll do it. Now or never, Red Wings. That's the way I'm looking at it, and hopefully tomorrow will be a now kind of day, and that they'll defeat the Boston Bruins. Kevin, it's always a pleasure. Until we meet again, everyone, enjoy all the hockey. Look forward to tomorrow night's Red Wing game. This is the Red and White Authority for Kevin Allen. I'm Art Regner. Take care. Enjoy yourselves. We'll see you. Bye-bye.